Horror games are unique. Most of the time, when I bring up horror games, a lot of people pretty much say, I can't watch this, or I can't play this, or I can't do horror games, or of course the famous I hate horror games. But why is that? Ultimately, horror games invoke fear, a very strong emotion in humans, of course, or just animals in general. We tend to run away from the things that we fear the most. And if you are able to pretty much encompass yourself in the realm or the atmosphere of a horror game, you will easily see why those games are actually hard to play. However, if a franchise turns people away, or a genre rather, why is it that so many people still seem to play those games? And not only that, it survived as a genre in general. Let's face it, even in movies, right? Movies and games, horror related, of course. If people really couldn't do it, it just wouldn't be made at all. However, curiosity is very strong, and human curiosity is no stranger to that as well, because we like to face things head on that we're either curious about, or all it takes is one person to play it, talk about it enough, and then you might be curious to watch it even if you can't play it. The horror genre is one of my favorite genres of all time, period, in gaming. I remember when I was really young, my uncle would come over and he would play Resident Evil Code Veronica. That was my first introduction to horror games, pretty much. Resident Evil, of all games, the most mainstream yet successful horror franchise ever, and personally to this day, in my top 2 favorite gaming franchises of all time. If we remove Smash, of course, I would have Kingdom Hearts and Resident Evil right there. And so it got to the point where my uncle would be playing, and I think, if I remember correctly, because sadly, even though I'm a big fan of Resident Evil, I haven't played Code Veronica, but there was this scene, I believe, where he was either in a greenhouse or what appeared to look like a locker room or a shower room or something, and a zombie was banging on the glass outside of the room, just banging on the glass until he finally broke in. And I remember screaming my ass off and having nightmares, and my mom just straight up said, look, you either have to wait till he sleeps or you can't play those games. Sorry, Aaron. But who knew that when I grew up, I would be able to pretty much love and appreciate the one thing that I hated so much, or feared rather. But regardless, right? Horror always makes me feel something. And quite literally, I think horror is the hardest genre to do, whether it be games or movies. Why? Because it's difficult to make good horror. You need to grab the best sound possible. You need to have the best level design, the best design period in terms of the overall aesthetic. Lighting needs to be on point. Did I say sound? Of course I did. Sound is super significant because you can either go over the top or you could have too little of it, and that kills the entire, world building that you're pretty much trying to do. Of course, you don't want to give players too much control in being able to save themselves. That's why some games opt to not have any weapons at all, while others actually will allow you to fight, but you'll have limited resources and limited ammo. Sometimes running is the best option instead of fighting, and of course, you have to watch out for the classic jump scares. But although jump scares are pretty much considered a cheat code, in past horror games, those were pretty much the go-to as developers started to get a lot better and better at incorporating them into games, and of course elevating the genre by incorporating new ways to scare people. Sometimes sound is all you need. Sometimes that creepy letter and the story written in that letter is enough to get someone tense. Sometimes no sound is needed at all. Have you ever played a horror game that's eerily quiet? All you can hear is the wind, the sound of an abandoned town. Silent Hill and Resident Evil are considered 2 of the greats when it comes to all of this. You know what I mean? When you think of horror, you mainly would automatically jump to Resident Evil, but horror fans definitely do recall Silent Hill as one of the greats, even though it didn't sell as well or become as mainstream popular as Resident Evil. Both games have a place in my heart. However, now in current day, I feel like AAA horror game experiences are actually losing touch of what made the genre so gold to begin with. In fact, I think they rely a little bit too much on what has already been done instead of trying to further push innovation. That's where indie horror games come in. Funny enough, sometimes the scariest games are the games that don't look scary at all. I'm looking at you, Doki Doki Literature Club Anamori. Being able to tell a captivating story in horror games is also something quite unique, but of course you cannot let down on the gameplay aspect of it all. Slow-paced horror games, fast-paced horror games, shooting horror games, of course, visual novel horror games. You can make different types of horror games throughout any mismatch of the genres that are out there. You can even do RPG horror games, again, looking at Amori, and be quite successful with it. Why? Because the number one thing that horror encompasses all across the board is the ability to make you feel something and make you feel something strongly, and of course throughout a lot of time. It's not just to say that you'll be scared once throughout a game. Some games will have you scared the whole way through. Some games will fall off and you'll feel scared at the beginning, but towards the end you've seen it all, right? That's of course when repetition kicks in, when you've seen the same enemy design over and over, right? If you're going to use a repetitive enemy design, you definitely at least need to make sure it works to some degree. Resident Evil 7 and of course Dead Space have this, where there are reoccurring enemy designs that happen a lot throughout the game. Dead Space having a bit more than Resident Evil 7, of course. However, they properly incorporate the enemies into the level design enough that sometimes you will get mixed. And when you get mixed, you are going to be terrified off of your ass. But overall, just talking up the genre, I think right now that indie developers are not only pushing innovation in the genre, but of course, I think they're polishing and making even better key concepts that we already have to this day. Key concepts that I already mentioned in this video, right? And so even then, with analog horror actually becoming a bit more popular, I think that playing stuff like Maple County, which is pretty much a game that revolves around the Mandela Catalog series, and you have other games like a camcorder horror game that's coming out. I think trying to do things that are a lot different that haven't been done are hard in horror. It's difficult because a lot of the time, right, you've seen it already. You've seen it a lot in Hollywood, in horror movies. Oh yeah, they did this pretty much in the last movie they did before. Why am I to be scared, right? That's why making proper horror sequels are difficult too. Some work, some don't. I remember the first horror movie that actually scared the shit out of me was Signs. Like the first time I saw the alien, oh my God. Or then you also have The Fourth Kind, actually scared the living shit out of me. I slept with the light on for a very long time. However, something I always found interesting was the fact that when you look at new age horror games, or of course you look at present day horror films, honestly, with the technology we have now, you would think that things would be a lot creepier. CGI is pretty much damn near perfect. And to be honest, I think that kind of takes away from the experience. And I wonder if anybody would agree with me. I think back in the day when it came to Nintendo 64, PlayStation 1, or just old horror films or old horror games, I think that like really grimy, I want to say pixelated or polygon-esque look gave more fear. There was more to the imagination, you know what I mean? Or even like if you listen to sound from back then, I think because sound wasn't as refined and of course wasn't as processed to like the max quality that we have today, I think that actually added a layer of horror to the game itself. It's something that I've always had a thought about, because even when today I play old horror games, sometimes I realize that this is a lot creepier than the AAA experiences we have now. Thinking of something, right? When I want to think of a horror game that I think was really, was going to be made by a AAA developer, PT Silent Hills. PT Silent Hills is, to me, what the horror genre needed but will never get. Hideo Kojima, Guillermo del Toro, and of course Junji Ito, all horror masterminds and in their own right, working together on a title. The demo came out and I still have it on my PS4 and I will never delete it because you can't re-download it. Thanks, Konami. That game, as short as it was, to this day, people are still going through that demo and finding things. Little details of what could have been. From the general concept to the enemy design, the level design, the story that was crafted in that demo, the sound, Everything was a perfect concoction of horror elements, literal mastery. You could tell that there were geniuses behind that project. It hurts me so badly that a game so well put together will never ever see the surface of the world simply because of a falling out that happened. I feel so bad because us as the fans of the genre, I know all to this day still have fond memories playing that PS4 demo, and all we have now is a demo. What would have happened to the genre if that game came out? Part of me still hopes that Kojima actually just doesn't call it Silent Hills and just make something totally new with the same team, their own horror game, because I really feel like they were onto something that would have been a massive blockbuster hit. Nothing that the genre has ever seen before. So I want more people to get to feel the joy of playing these games, right? You can play as many AAA horror games as you want, and not to say that they're bad or anything, but certain horror might work for you that doesn't work for someone else, and vice versa, and that is also something that makes it special. And that is why I'm always eager to try the next big horror game or the next horror game that you never heard of, and that's where the indie developers come in. So with that being said, the power of emotion is strong, and horror invokes fear, mystery, but also curiosity. And I think, honestly, the most fascinating trait of humanity is curiosity. Sometimes we may run away from things we don't understand, but we always decide on our own whether or not we're going to actually confront our curiosity and the things we don't understand. And I think that's powerful. And I think that horror is the genre that captures that the strongest. And while there might not be a lot of people that can play those games, but maybe they might be able to watch, those of us that are able to venture through the darkness, of course, we're all able to live through exciting experiences while also delivering them to an audience that otherwise maybe wouldn't have been able to see them as well. And I think for as long as the entertainment industry survives, horror will always have a place in it, and more minds will be introduced to the genre to deliver new stories, new experiences, and new ways to get scared shitless. This is NAKAT. Take it easy. Peace out. Deuces.